Now, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers is a business member organization that brings together manufacturers into one lobby group, and they use that lobby as a voice to do very many things. First, to build their own capacity, and also to talk about the things that they need to see, and then engage advocacy with government and other agencies. Have I done justice to the definition of CAM?
You have done justice.
So the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Tobias Alando, is our guest. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
It's good to have you here today.
Thank you.
As we wait for tomorrow, when Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury will be giving his budget statement.
Correct.
Does it really matter whether he speaks tomorrow or speaks today or he doesn't speak at all?
It matters because it's a formality, it's a process that they have to follow. But what we are keen on is typically the outcome of the deliberation that they will have in Parliament, and the final conclusion, and what it will have in terms of impact to manufacturing sector. Yes.
The manufacturing sector, like Mariam you were saying earlier, has just been doing poorly in Kenya for a while. Is that true?
Very true. The last time...
Paint the picture.
Yeah. Let me paint a picture. The last time we had a double-digit growth in terms of the GDP contribution was in 2011, when our contribution to the GDP was about 11.8%. Since then, it has continued to drop. Now we are at 7.3%. We've dropped compared to last year, where we had 7.5. So we've had about a 2% drop. That shows you there is need to have a conversation around how do we grow the manufacturing sector. If you look at the GDPs in the world, the GDPs that have really grown and are growing fast, the major attribution is the growth also in the manufacturing sector. Look at what in Africa, South Africa, what they're doing, their manufacturing sector is growing, their GDP is growing. If you look at the biggest countries in terms of manufacturing in the world, China, they're growing so fast because of the manufacturing sector. Same applies to India. Look at now US is concerned because they ship their manufacturing to China. Now they want to bring it back. Why? Because they see value in manufacturing. So as a country, there is no way we are going to grow if the manufacturing sector is stagnating. Our economy has largely grown or has largely been stabilized because of agriculture. But we need to have a balance where we are supporting the manufacturing sector.
I was actually thinking about that earlier. We seem very complacent in our manufacturing and, in our agriculture and service bubble. So then there's no impetus to spur manufacturing. Is it because, and this is speculative probably, but is it because traditionally we've had boom periods for tourism, for example, boom periods for agriculture. So it's like, okay, we're good. Why do we need to put money into industry and manufacturing?
I think that's an assumption that we have, because tourism and agriculture, yes, will support the economy, but in terms of impact, because if you look at the manufacturing sector, as much as we are now contributing at 7.3% of the GDP, we are also employing about 369,000 people directly. Which is about 11% of overall employment compared to other sectors. So if you want to really employ many people, then establish manufacturing plants. Number two, in terms of revenue contribution, we contribute about 18%, which is about 380 billion in tax revenue. So manufacturing sector is a force that you cannot ignore if you really want to grow as a nation. So all actions, in my view, need to be taken towards supporting the manufacturing sector in the country. We were the biggest player in the region in terms of the manufacturing sector.
Right.
We were. tables are changing. Tanzania has really grown in terms of even the manufacturing growth. The real growth for Tanzania has been about 8.3%. We grew by only 2.8%. Many industries have moved to Tanzania and region and the other regional countries because of the environment. The predictability of the environment and the tax and policy environment in those regions are conducive.
Right.
So what some of the Kenyan industries have done, of course, largely there are other new manufacturing plants that have come in, but it will take time for them to have to grow and to have that impact. So some industries, what they have done, they have opened up subsidiaries in Tanzania so that they produce and then export back.
And then they export back to Kenya.
Yes.
So you're still accessing the same market, but you're manufacturing elsewhere.
Correct.
What is the impact of that for the Kenyan economy?
The impact of that is unemployment. Now we've shipped our employment to the region. So people will produce there and export to Kenya. So we will become largely a trading nation if we are not careful.
Right.
But if we take the necessary actions, then definitely we can reverse that.
Okay. I want to get a view from someone who, sits at the head of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers on how many multinationals and national, manufacturers have left or folded, and then how many have come in, because we're often given anecdotal examples of so-and-so is coming, so-and-so is coming.
Yes.
But when you look at the rate of exit, I think it's probably a little bit higher.
It's a conversation that people need to have, and sometimes it's also a lot of speculation around it. Indeed, there are multinationals that have exited, and their reasons for exit is the cost of production is very expensive here. They would rather produce in Egypt and then export it back to Kenya through COMESA, which is duty-free. But there are also companies that have come in. New companies that have also invested largely in the country. So we can't forget about that.
Yes.
But the multinationals, I can tell you, there are about 2 or 3 that I know of that have exited the market because of the conditions that I've mentioned above.
And how many have come in? Not multinational. Yeah, multinationals actually.
No, we've not had multinational come in, but we have other bigger companies that have invested in Kenya and have created a lot of employment. If we put this conversation to another level, there are things, you see, people have underrated manufacturing in Kenya, and largely the citizens even don't know that we also assemble mobile phones in this country. Citizens don't know that currently we are also doing toiletries, the toilet seats, the sinks, are manufactured here in Kenya and are exported.
Manufactured means what?
Made in Kenya.
Manufactured.
Like we have toilets made in Kenya, sinks made in Kenya.
Yes.
End to end.
Yes.
Okay.
From clay to final product.
Right.
And exported also. So there's a lot that is happening, but we don't know. Phones are being assembled here.
Yes.
I visited a company that is doing that, and they have employed largely the young people. And if you look at their capacity right now, if we incentivize them, we remove unnecessary duty, excise duties that we are imposing, the investment can triple. You will employ more young people. And these are conversations that even India has done. India talked to Samsung and say, we have the market. The only way we are going to allow you here is so that you allow us to assemble and sell to our market. Same can happen to Kenya. I mean, it's a decision that our policymakers need to really have and make a call.
Do you think, so citizens don't have a clear visibility of what manufacturing is taking place in Kenya? Because, I mean, we are used to buying so many things that are from elsewhere. We don't even notice when something is actually
made in Kenya.
Made in Kenya.
Yes.
Do our policymakers know? So it's okay, us guys are ignorant.
Yes.
Are those people ignorant?
They know.
They know.
They know.
They know that these things are happening.
They know those investments have come in.
They also know what these investments need.
Correct.
To continue growing and to achieve higher potential.
That is our role. That is what now we tell them. And in fact, we've even urged the parliamentary committee on the budget that visit some of these companies. Through visits, you will understand some of the proposals we are putting forward and the ripple effect in terms of the decision that you make in the boardrooms.
So then, what would, for example, just explain, last year, contribution of manufacturing to GDP was at 7.6%. It was a bit of a growth from the previous year, right? And then it drops again to 7.3%. Why?
Because of decisions that we have made, the policy decision. I'll give you one example. The government introduced export investment promotion levy at 17.5%, touching on steel, touching on paper, and touching on coal. This has had a negative effect. If you look at the economic survey of the recent 2024 economic survey, two sectors largely dropped, mining and construction. And if you look back, the reason why they dropped is because of that simple policy decision.
What was that? What does that mean? What is the export investment promotion levy?
So it means it's a duty that is imposed on imports of raw materials and inputs in the manufacturing sector. So if you look at your costs, already you've paid maybe 10% duty or 25%, add IDF, add railway development levy, and then add 17.5 export investment promotion levy. Largely, it will make your cost differential very high. It is cheaper to import your products. For example, paper. Paper sector, we were a dominant in the region in terms of the paper sector before the export investment promotion levy. But when this was introduced, paper became expensive in Kenya.
What?
Yes. It was easier, cheaper to import paper from Egypt and other regions than manufacture it here in Kenya because of that one single policy.
Right.
And this means even packaging, just simple things like
everything,
packaging.
even packaging.
Because I remember having a conversation last year, I think facilitated as well by CAM, of a company that was manufacturing paper packaging materials off Mombasa.
Correct.
And they had a deal, for example, to supply to Del Monte for export.
Right.
And because of taxation, they had to lay off staff. They lost the deal. So this is basically just that.
Yes.
Export investment promotion levy comes in, you're slapped with it, you shut down your manufacturing, you say, let me just import the paper from.
Correct.
And again, it's 17.5% as a new tax on top of the other.
On top of the others, it becomes very expensive.
Right.
So what we tell the policymakers, when you are making a decision, do simulation, what will be the impact of this decision on our local manufacturing?
Do they come to you before, when they're in their drafting stages, when they're at budget policy stage, when they're at all those stages before we get to a bill and act, a budget, statement?
We are invited to make submissions. We make submissions. Some submissions are taken, some are not taken. And when they're not taken, normally when you submit budget, you provide justification. We are saying we want this duty removed because if you impose this duty, we are going to lose competitiveness. One is we are going to lose competitiveness. We've done comparison with our regional counterparts of the same product manufactured in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. You realize in Kenya is expensive because of these duties you're imposing.
Right.
Remember, Tanzania and Uganda do not have IDF and RDA, 2.5, 1.5.
They don't have an import declaration fee?
They don't.
Unaingiza tu?
They don't.
Wow, must be nice.
So there's a differential already.
Wow.
Then you include maybe a 17.5 or an excise duty for that matter. So the intention of the policymakers that you impose duty or taxes to generate revenue without really thinking of that impact on industry is a question that we need to sit together and answer.
Tobias.
Yes.
Let's flip the coin, okay, and look at the thinking at the policy-making table. It may not necessarily only be to raise revenue.
Correct.
For example, I remember hearing the argument, even from as high up as the president, on, look, people, we have capacity here to have our own coal, to have our own steel. We can do our own mining here, right? We need to impose a tax so that it make it more expensive to import, and so on and so forth. Justification given. And he says, look, if we impose a tax that then allows spurs, investors such as this one, to invest and open a plant here and employ jobs, is that a problem? And people say there's no problem.
I agree with you. When we impose, and every investor needs to be protected, but let's do what I call assimilations in terms of those decisions. Let's not do just blanket decision and say we're imposing 17.5. You take the example of the export investment promotion levy. Has it had a positive or a negative impact? It has had a negative impact on certain sectors.
Right.
So we need to go back and sit on the table and say, what is the best way to protect
to
already?
Achieve what we want
yes, but also to protect already investment.
Okay. Can I ask?
Yes.
Have you noticed a movement towards what was intended to be achieved here? For example, saying that we are going to encourage and spur more investment in the local steel manufacturing, in local coal investments. Have we seen a positive on that?
No. We've, and I'm glad we had a conversation with the ministry and the Minister of Industry in regards to steel and cement, because we needed to find a solution why investment have dropped largely. Because it's not only investment, but you also look at the cost of the product to the consumer. And the decision, the proposal that is coming forward is let's revisit the export investment promotion levy and reduce it. And largely members, industries are agreeable to the reduction.
Right.
So we will measure this next year and say if the budget that will be read the coming weeks, if the budget now adopts reduction of this investment promotion levy, then next year we can sit with you and say what impact has that had.
Did it have, yeah.
Yes.
A simple like analogy I was thinking of. You want Mariam, Tobias wants Mariam to have more money. Mariam gets her money from Latif.
Yeah.
Do you give Mariam more money or do you take money from Latif? That's genuinely it. If you want to spur an industry here, then spur the industry here.
Directly.
Like directly, as opposed to making imports will become more expensive when whatever is locally produced is cheaper. Automatic. It's like, anyway, I'm not claiming to be an expert.
Sounds like
but
logic, right?
Yeah, it does sound very 1+1.
And it sounds like everything that you're saying here sounds like, well, we can clearly see. We are not experts in this field, but we can clearly see. The people at those policy tables are people from the Ministry of Industry and Trade. That's what they do, like what you do.
Yes.
The people at the National Treasury also look at crunch numbers and they depend also on data from KNBS and others. Why is it so difficult to get it?
I think we need just to admit sometimes we make a call that doesn't work, and then we sit back and make the correction. That's the only way we are going to progress, because numbers will not lie. If you made a decision or a policy decision, the impact will be seen in the few months to come. And that impact has been seen in the terms of our GDP contribution. Otherwise, we would have grown tremendously.
Yeah.
If those decisions
If we
were
continue
really...
that 7.5 would now probably be higher.
Yeah, we would be
Closer to
higher.
8.
We would be higher.
Right.
Again, our Vision 2030 talks about Kenya, Mariam. Vision 2030 is, look at the year 2030. How many years away are we
We are
from?
5 years away.
Okay.
Less than 5 because
It said-
we are well into 2025.
That we shall make Kenya a middle-income industrializing nation by 2030. The word industrialization is there,
Yeah.
right? It's in our blueprint, Vision 2030. How can you tell me that the subsequent governments since 2011 have like been shooting ourselves in the foot by, if our industrialization has dropped from 11.8% contribution to GDP in 2011, coming all the way down, that tells you that
to 7.3.
We've lost our vision.
It's what I call you put some things at the back table when new governments come in and we just drop the ball.
Why?
So because Vision 2030 was a project of Mwai Kibaki.
It shouldn't be that way. It wasn't a project of the. It wasn't a project of Mwai Kibaki. It started during that time, but it's a Kenyan initiative.
But that's how the political class view it.
Yes.
That if we achieve Vision 2030, the credit will go to Mwai Kibaki.
So then, we come up with our own
projects. Yeah, let's come up with our Vision 2050. Our, let me not
I think that is why we need to fix the nation. And that is why we're having this conversation and saying, okay, we are largely want to move our manufacturing sector and employment in this country. What decisions do we need to make in terms of doing that? What mistakes have we done?
Right.
And accept as policymakers, also accept where we've made mistakes.
Agreed.
The problem is we are just tough and thinking we are doing the right thing
and holding
on
a wrong position.
While we are bickering, the other countries are moving forward.
Right.
Egypt is growing and they'll all flood our market,
right,
even through the AFCFTA. Goods, you can access anything from anywhere in Africa.
Potatoes, cotton,
everything, whatever. And anything.
Paper, yes.
Anything. So someone will say, I would rather import than manufacture here. So governments need to incentivize manufacturing and attract more investment into manufacturing, because that is the only way you are creating jobs.
Right.
Let's take a break, Tobias.
Yeah.
We'll come back and continue this conversation. I'll ask you, because I've sat in a meeting where the manufacturers, the private sector, and the president were sitting and discussing issues, round tables and so on and so forth. Why is it not working? Tobias Alando is the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We are discussing the manufacturing sector. What does manufacturing sector need from the government so that it can continue growing? Is that among the proposals in the finance bill? That's what we'll be discussing shortly. Keep it here. As that. We continue our conversation on manufacturing sector and what it needs, and there are several queries and comments here. Maurice, and that it says, my inquiry is, do we do the way Asia did, where they sat down, the core manufacturing entities looked at their impact and put in finances in them, which they're reaping now despite the challenges, right? He had also said earlier, I think the MPs did not go beyond the idea of having local manufacturing and reducing imports. I think now it's hearing them that also needs investment, something they had not calculated, and so on and so forth. Star Kenya says, 7% GDP contribution in 2025. You have no clue of the issues which hugely stem from global jostling to deindustrialize Africa as a whole. Are there external factors that could also be contributing to the, slow growth of manufacturing? Okay.
Of course, we are cognizant of the geopolitical squabbles that are happening in the world between the big players around the world. But having said that, does not mean that as a country we need to make our own call in terms of the growing of the manufacturing sector. Remember when we had COVID in 2020 and a lot of countries were on lockdown. We couldn't have goods come from reliable routes. We had to find a way how to feed our nation. We had to find a way how to manufacture certain products locally. We never used to manufacture masks. That time we did. So even as we have the geopolitics issues that are happening, innovation will come in when Africa and Kenya makes a decision that we need to move into manufacturing. And the projection is that Africa, Asia, and particularly Africa and Asia will be now the frontiers in manufacturing sector. Do we have to wait for someone to tell us to wake up? No, we have to make that initiative. We are trying to make the manufacturing sector look very dicey so that it is not left for particular people to manufacture. Even our young people, this conversation on value add needs to start. Different counties, different communities need to start value add. The soaps that we use in our own villages needs to be produced wherever we are. Cooking oil, every other items that we need needs to start small. That is what China did and India did, and that's why they are where they are today.
So we already have, like, templates.
Right.
These people did this.
Exactly.
And they got here.
And they got here.
Exactly.
We could do the same.
It seems easy on paper. And now speaking of paper, there's a few proposals, like we were speaking over the break, on the break, that it's been a fairly conservative, finance bill this year. Proposals have been conservative as well, but there's specifically the moving of certain things from zero-rated to VAT exempt.
Yes.
A lot of people, like either way, see the same, zero-rated and exempt. They sound like the same, Kizungu-wise. But please explain what is being proposed to be moved from zero-rated to exempt, and what does that mean from a cost perspective for manufacturers and for us, the end users?
So, in terms of moving items from zero rate to exempt, it means that items that have been moved from zero rate to exempt will not claim, for manufacturers will not claim input VAT. If I produce an item, that cost in terms of input VAT that I pay, I will have to transfer it to the consumer, making my product very expensive. So we are looking at competitiveness, and the impact of competitiveness will be negative if we move items from zero rate to exempt. Medicament, EV or automotive products and other products. And our proposal in terms of the conversation we have had with the parliamentary committee is that if your intention was to address the issue of VAT refund, then where we sit, that is not a solution.
Right.
Just address the administrative challenges that we may have had under the VAT refund program.
Right.
And once we sort that, because other countries are doing it well, South Africa has a very good VAT refund mechanism, and it is working. They have not moved items from VAT zero rate to exempt as a solution.
Right.
Yeah.
We start threading these things because we see the headlines about fraudulent VAT claims and how many billions we're losing because of fraudulent VAT claims. Then now you see the thread, okay, so the solution proposed is to move them from zero rated to exempt so they can't claim. And again, I always wonder, do we skip the step where it's like, okay, what if we just made sure there were no fraudulent VAT claims? Only those who genuinely have manufactured and have used inputs and paid VAT for them could. I don't know, I feel like we skipped steps, but that was one. The other one was the proposal now to reduce the export, what did you call it? The
Export Investment Promotion Levy, yes.
Yes, that's a big win. Any potential downsides? I don't think so.
No, there's no. If it is reduced, it will have a positive impact on certain sectors, and we look forward for its reduction. Yes.
Data access now. KRA wants to access our accounts.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I'm not easy about it because there is no guarantee. Accessing my data, for example, my sales data or sales information, if it lands to my competitor, then that will be very bad for business. So we still do not have a guarantee until it is demonstrated otherwise that this data will not leak
So you don't have an issue with the principle of it, with them accessing your data. You're just worried about the safety.
Both.
Both. Okay. Okay.
Who wants his or her
No
data
one.
to be
No
accessed?
one. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's about competition. We're in a market and we're competing, and you never know someone is connected, and I will be able to say, "Oh, my competitor is doing this. Can you send me their data?"
Yeah.
Right.
And that will be unfair level playing field.
Yeah.
For businesses.
Your entire client list
Yes.
will be in someone else's hands.
So we need an assurance that that is not going to happen, and if it happens, who is going to be liable?
Right. Ahead of any budget making, by the time it goes to Parliament, various sectors are involved and engaged. Now, the manufacturing sector through CAM and also the private sector through KEPSA, you're very, very involved in having conversations and proposals of this is what we'd like.
Correct.
That the new tax measures and the new finance bill and the new budget also should look like so that it can support the sector to grow. Are there some things that you had strongly suggested to the government that you'd like to see included in this year's budget that were not captured?
First of all, I'll tell you that this has been a tradition for many years, and even the successful and growth of the manufacturing sector has been largely attributed to the inputs that we provide for so many years, since 2011 when the growth was high. So there are a couple of proposals that we have submitted. If you look at this current finance bill, it largely touches on excise duty, VAT, and income tax, and then there's another one on export investment promotion levy. So largely it's around taxation of our inputs. And we have given a demonstration to Parliament that when you tax our inputs, we become very uncompetitive. We've given a scenario of the packaging material, craft paper. We've given an example of they wanted to introduce excise on sugar. We've given an example of steel and coal, where they want to introduce excise duty. So we are waiting to see in terms of the final outcome whether what we propose as change would be considered. And if it is not considered, then we have to come back to the drawing table and have a conversation with them in terms of those impacts.
Right.
What's a big thing that you've proposed to be changed?
On zero rates, those are the major ones.
That's a major one.
That's a major one. It's going to have a ripple effect in terms of the final cost of the product. Yes.
And when you had the presentation before the finance committee,
Correct.
what was the reaction like? Were they looking at you with blank stares like,
No.
or were they nodding in agreement?
The beauty of such sessions is creating an understanding and demystifying that boardroom perception of certain items. So the beauty of those conversations, because we even go with samples and say, this is the product, you are imposing excise duty on it, so that you don't assume.
And models are a hope as well.
Models, and we've done also simulations. If you do this, this is the impact of Kenya, this is the impact of Uganda and Tanzania. So the beauty of those conversations is you demonstrate the practicality of those decisions to the MP. There are those that are curious, they want to know more. There are those that question logically, and we are able to demonstrate to them. So our conversation with them has been around them understanding, making them understand that you make this decision, this is the impact. So I've seen it's different. I don't see people who are fixated in terms of this is really what we want to do, but I've seen from their facial expression, like, okay, so this is the impact. What do you propose?
Right.
And we say, this is what we propose.
You know what I don't buy, Mariam?
Yes.
Is those reactions.
Yeah.
Because Tobias will tell you all the meetings that they hold, whether it's with parliamentarians or with ministry people or the National Treasury, it's usually very good camaraderie. In fact, we understand. Yes, they ask questions.
I hear you. I hear you.
They're like, so if we do this, what about if we do this and the other?
Nice.
And then you walk out of that room, and what comes out later, you're like,
Were we in the
Yeah.
same meeting?
What on earth happened?
Are we in the
It's
same
the same
class?
thing. Like you have those conversations where a new government comes in and says we want to support our manufacturing
Yes.
sector. There were round tables in Kibaki days. There were round tables in Uhuru days when Uhuru would call the KEPSA and say, "Come, let's hear the manufacturer. What are the pain points?"
Right.
Really, really, State House. Same with William Ruto, but we are seeing a decline in this. What happens in between the meeting and the implementation?
I wouldn't say what happens, because I don't know what happens. But what I know is that we provide our submissions, and our submissions are available for scrutiny, and they are not like biased submissions that we are not thinking of an individual company. We are largely thinking of how to support the Kenyan manufacturing sector. And I think they have had their learnings from my own view, from the previous submissions and the impact that the previous submissions have had in terms of the statistical outcomes. And probably this time around, I expect to see a different scenario. But also to give a compliment where it's due, for the first time ever, the Minister for Industry has called particular sectors that were affected in terms of that growth, and we've had tangible conversation. And that one I applaud the ministry for Honorable Kinanjui for taking that initiative on addressing issues around steel and the issue around cement,
Right.
to see how we can make the necessary changes and move the sector.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a few questions on YouTube and on WhatsApp as well. Let me start with Michael Comet, who says, with influential cartels and politically connected importers undermining local industry, does the budget actually stand a chance of serving genuine manufacturers rather than elite interests? So I think there's a feeling that ata manufacturing, kila kitu Kenya ni cartel, but just hold your thought. Hold your thoughts. Star Kenya is asking, additionally, the fees charged at CAM for budding manufacturers like myself, don't they think they're exacerbating the issue by being an exclusive club? Cottage industries are not supported. So perhaps maybe speak to, the fees charged at CAM. I'm not sure how much for, especially now budding enterprises and industries. And of course, cartels.
So let me start by talking about CAM as a representative organization. We represent all manufacturers, small, medium, and even large manufacturers. And the fees is designed to cater for everyone, particularly even the small manufacturers. We have an SME category of the manufacturing sector. They only pay 11,500 per year.
Okay.
There are large manufacturers who pay more, but the small, medium enterprises that have joining the organization pay 11,500 per year.
Okay. All right. Alafu, hiyo swali ya cartels, and there's also another one on energy, but let's do the cartels first.
So every country has cartels, to be honest. But if we need to be intentional and say, what do we need to do? And that intention is from the policymaker and the government, making a decision that they want to drive the manufacturing sector, then cut off all tradings. Cut off all tradings that affect the manufacturing sector. Let us trade, in terms of import, only items that we cannot manufacture locally.
Does that serve you? Does that serve the consumer?
That's one, because then the imports could be cheaper even when we can manufacture them locally.
Or higher quality.
Yeah, or higher quality, true. And then...
but when will we create jobs locally? If you import, you're largely creating jobs outside there. We have many youths that require jobs. The only way that they're going to get jobs is when we can manufacture those things.
Okay.
Yes.
From... not an employment perspective now, but from I'm trying to get into the industry, and it seems that even as we try to spur manufacturing from a policy perspective, within the manufacturing industry, it seems there's cartels. I think that's what Maurice Andati was asking. Was this Maurice or the Star Kenya? Michael Comet, sorry.
That would then now block you from venturing into a certain sector.
Right.
Not
I
really.
see it. Okay.
And
I think I've heard rumors. Let me give it
yes.
anecdotal experiences or stories you hear. People try to start up, especially FMCG, anything that moves quickly, and you set up base. But some big corporation, some big multinational comes and just whacks you, and not from a policy perspective, but often underhanded tricks that leave you outside the market. I won't mention names for legal reasons.
At least there's a competition authority for such.
Yes, and the competition authority is doing its work, and they have invited a lot of people for questions.
But beyond that,
it has to be it has to be something that's in the public domain and legal for the competition authority to be involved. But underhanded tricks are often...
In fact, that's where they come in. When you're playing underhanded tricks.
Yes,
that's their
they
job.
will show up.
Feature. Okay, so...
I think my bigger issue is when you have big players who are able to have influence on policy, and then such policy then does not support the growing of small industries to mushroom and grow, right? And we hear all these stories all the time that some certain levies are actually pushed by some players in the industry so they can protect their turf and then also kill the other smaller players or kill competition. How do you, as a lobby that brings in all the good, bad apples, all of them, they're just apples to you. They're fee-paying apples. How do you control to make sure that everybody is playing by the book?
So, before we take up a position, it has to be agreed upon in the sector.
Okay.
And the sectors have big and small players. So all the players are largely involved in the conversation. So I don't see in terms of a bigger player taking up a position that would largely affect the other sector members, and this is a position that is taken by CAM to government. And if there is a perception that has been created that some bigger players are making a call or pushing proposals that will affect others, then the impact will be visible in terms of closure of those smaller companies. And we'll ask ourselves a lot of questions. Are we growing the manufacturing sector or not?
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're saying that it's possible that some big player could go and have direct influence with the policymaker, and a certain policy measure is introduced, a tax, a levy, whatever, that would then impact the entirety of the industry. But for them, there's actually growth.
True, that can happen. It depends on how that policy position is presented. But its impact, like I said, after a few years, after 1 year or so, especially when we do the economic surveys, when we could do an assessment and say this policy decision, has it affected largely the manufacturing sector or specific sector? Then based on that, we propose a revision of the policy. And for me, I'm pushing that we be in a state in this country where we can look back at our policy decision and say, here we made a mistake, let us revise, let us make the necessary changes to have the impact. Yeah.
I want to shift, not the responsibility, but a little bit of the conversation to consumers. What role do we play in inspiring manufacturing here? And also, what role now, for example, like Keproba, who I was talking to yesterday, play in getting us markets outside?
So as consumers, we encourage you to buy local. A larger number of consumers still don't believe that we can manufacture to the best of the best standards in this country. So they believe if I import this, then it's better. You're forgetting that we also produce textile that is exported to the US and AGOA to this big company like H&M, Levi, and the rest. So that shows you the quality that can be produced here can reach the international market and be accepted in the international market. To the consumers, is we want you to accept and promote local manufacturing because that way you employ your brother and sister in one or the other.
Okay.
Keproba does export promotion and marketing Kenyan products abroad. Our export is largely, our export share to the GDP is at around 30%. If you look at a comparative analysis with a country with the same population, we are at 50 million. Vietnam is about 60 million people,
Right.
but their export ratio to GDP is almost 100%. They
Wow.
export a lot.
Okay.
And that has been because of intention. The government has made intention and saying, we are going to encourage local production and we're going to get you markets for these products.
Ooh,
It's the kind of thing that
intention.
we need our governments to do. Okay. One day,
Yeah.
we shall get it. We shall get it. And it starts with us starting to think through it, because we are the ones who put governments in place.
Correct. Yeah.
And we've got to start thinking about the right people that we're putting in place. And so then we start asking them, so how come our manufacturing is doing this? How come our exports are only
Doing that,
doing the other? And so on and so forth. But Tobias, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Asante sana. Tobias Alando is the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. In the next hour, we're going to have a conversation with Professor Mwenda Ntarangwi. He's the Vice Chancellor of the USIU Kenya, and he'll be here. We're talking about the higher education sector, the environment, and what it needs to be fixed. Keep it here for that. Coming back shortly.